The fog clung to the lake that night, curling around the old wooden dock like it was alive. I could hear the water lapping softly, a rhythm that felt almost like breathing. The cabin's single light flickered through the trees, weak and pale, barely cutting through the mist. I was alone, or so I thought. Every few minutes, I caught movement in the corner of my eye, shadows folding and unfolding where no one should have been. The wind hummed through the pines, carrying a faint, almost human whisper, a voice I couldn't place. My reflection in the window showed me staring back, yet I could swear something else moved behind me, just beyond the glass. I told myself it was imagination, the long silence playing tricks on me, but then a soft rustling on the porch froze me in place. I never should have opened the door. The lake was still, mist curled across its surface, slow and thick. I could see nothing beyond the gray edges, nothing but shadows that seemed almost alive. Soft whispers floated over the water. Not wind, not birds. Melodic, faint, almost singing. I stepped closer to the shore. My shoes pressed into the damp earth, and every movement felt amplified. The whispers followed me, brushing against my ears, soft enough to doubt, sharp enough to hear. A rowboat drifted lazily, though no one had touched it. It rocked gently, like a heartbeat beneath the fog. Something about it called to me. Curiosity tugged at my chest, sharp and cold. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. The shadows at the water's edge shifted with the fog. Figures I couldn't focus on, too fleeting, too quick, slipped in and out of sight. Each time I blinked, they seemed closer. The whispers grew louder, threading through the mist, wrapping around my thoughts. I reached the dock. The wooden planks groaned beneath me, though there was no wind. The boat floated nearer, pulled by some quiet insistence. A chill ran through my fingers when I brushed against the damp rope. Under the water, I thought I saw movement. Something shifting, just beneath the surface, slow, deliberate. I couldn't tell if it was shadow or waiting. The whispers deepened, curling into my name. I wanted to turn and run, but my legs wouldn't obey. The fog thickened, swallowing the lake's edges. Shapes danced inside it, long and thin, like limbs that shouldn't belong to anything living. I leaned closer to water, and for a heartbeat, the lake mirrored me perfectly. Then not at all. Ripples stretched my reflection into someone else. Someone watching. The wind picked up, soft at first, brushing the reeds, then colder, pressing against my skin like fingers. The whispers twisted into pleading tones, teasing promises or warnings I couldn't decipher. The boat rocked more urgently now. It called, patient and certain. The shadows by the shore melted into fog, then returned, closer than before. I froze. Every instinct screamed to leave, but fascination, terror, and some strange longing held me still. Something slipped beneath the surface. A shadow, darker than the night, sliding under the water with grace. The whispers paused, as if holding their breath. I heard my own heartbeat echo in the silence. Then the fog swallowed it all. The rowboat floated empty, still. The shadows vanished, but the feeling of being watched lingered. I stepped back. My shoes squelched against the muddy bank. The whispers were gone, or perhaps they had only gone quiet, waiting. The lake looked calm again, too calm, and I knew I hadn't been alone. The forest pressed close. Branches tangled overhead, blotting out the sky. The air smelled of damp pine and earth, thick with stillness. I wandered, unsure of how far I'd gone, when I saw it. A cabin, dark and still, tucked between trees that shouldn't have been there. It wasn't on any map I had. It didn't belong. Its windows were black mirrors, but shadows flickered inside. I could feel them, moving just beyond the glass. The air around the cabin thrummed softly, as if it were breathing, waiting. I stepped closer. Each footfall on the forest floor sounded like a drum, reverberating in the quiet. A floorboard groaned beneath the cabin's porch, though no one moved. The door was half open. I hesitated. Every instinct screamed to leave, yet curiosity pressed me forward, soft and insistent. Inside, the air was colder. Shadows stretched along the walls, twisting in corners where light should have reached. Objects shifted subtly when I wasn't looking. A chair angled slightly, Then a book slid from the shelf without cause. The floorboards creaked. Soft footsteps echoed behind me, though no one followed. The scent of old would mix with something faintly metallic. I could almost taste it on my tongue. I tried to leave. The door felt farther than before. The hallway stretched endlessly, walls bending in ways that didn't make sense. I froze. A shadow moved just out of reach, tracing the edge of my vision. It mimicked my breathing, yet didn't breathe itself. Something whispered, soft, almost friendly, then turned cold. I wanted to look away. I couldn't. The cabin felt alive. Every creak, every subtle shift was deliberate. It watched. It waited. I stepped back, and the door was gone. Or maybe it had never been there. The cabin existed in some strange space. Part memory, part dream, part something I shouldn't see. The shadows retreated slightly. The chill lingered. Every corner held a secret I couldn't name. I left the porch, but the image of the cabin stayed in my mind. Its darkness, the silent presence inside, like a question with no answer. I walked away, but even in the thinning forest, I could feel it watching, waiting, as if the cabin might follow me home. The trail narrowed between tall pines. Fog lingered low, curling around roots and rocks. The forest was quiet, yet alive with something unseen. Pale lights appeared, soft, bobbing, floating between the trees. No wind moved them. They drifted with purpose, almost aware. I followed, cautious. Every step stirred fallen needles, crunching softly beneath my feet. The lights seemed to adjust, always keeping just ahead, always just out of reach. Footsteps echoed behind me. I spun. Nothing. Only the trail, empty and still, yet the sound persisted, soft, deliberate. Shadows stretched long, twisting across trunks. They moved faster than they should, slipping along with the lights, as if guiding me. The air smelled faintly of smoke, though no fire burned. My breath hung white, clouding in the chill. The lights pulsed gently, reflecting in my eyes like stars fallen to the forest floor. One light flickered, then vanished. The others dimmed, then disappeared altogether. The silence that followed pressed against my chest. I realized the shadows lingered, unblinking, watching. I turned in every direction. The path I had been following seemed familiar, but subtly wrong. Trees shifted just slightly, roots curling where they hadn't been. A rustle whispered through the undergrowth. It could have been wind, or it could have been something else, sliding along unseen. I kept moving. Every step felt heavy, weighted by eyes I couldn't see. The lights might have returned, or perhaps I imagined them, but the feeling of being followed remained silent, patient, insistent. Branches scraped my arms, leaving faint marks, tingling against my skin. The forest seemed to breathe, fog curling and twisting around me, pulling me deeper. When I reached the clearing, I stopped. The trail ended. The forest stretched endlessly beyond. One light had remained. It pulsed faintly, then blinked out. The others had vanished completely. And still I felt eyes, not lights, not shadows, just attention, trailing me from everywhere and nowhere. I turned slowly. The clearing was empty, silent but heavy with presence. A lingering unease settled in my chest, like a warning I couldn't name. I stepped forward, but the forest seemed to breathe around me, waiting. And the lights, pale, silent, sentient, were gone, leaving only the feeling of being followed. The cabin felt smaller inside. The walls pressed in softly, the wood old and cold under my fingers. Footsteps echoed across the floorboards. Soft, careful, deliberate. I froze. No one should have been here. The doors creaked, then closed gently, as if nudged by an unseen hand. I tried to move. The hallway stretched farther than it should. Each exit seemed to recede, folding into shadowed corners I couldn't measure. A draft slipped past me, chilling my neck. The air smelled faintly of damp wood and something sharper, metallic. I turned slowly. A shadow pressed against the glass. Not a person. Something darker, still, silent, watching, waiting. The footsteps continued. Sometimes near, sometimes far. No pattern, no source. I held my breath, The cabin alive with soft, deliberate motion. Objects shifted subtly. A chair angled slightly. A book slid across the floor. I dared not touch it. Everything seemed deliberate, as though the house itself moved around me. I tried the door again. It led nowhere. A hallway mirrored itself, twisting, folding into the same darkness I'd just passed. I felt the shadow's gaze behind the glass. It didn't move when I did. It only watched, and the footsteps echoed closer, then receded, never ending. The cabin's heartbeat seemed to sync with mine. Each creak, each groan, was a whisper I couldn't understand. I backed into a corner. The shadow didn't approach. It only lingered, a quiet presence of something patient, something eternal. I could feel it in the floorboards, in the air thickening around me, in the faint metallic scent curling through the cabin. The lights flickered, just briefly, and in that blink, the shadow vanished. Or perhaps it never had moved at all. I stood there, heart hammering, mind taut with silent panic. Every door, every hallway, every floorboard held memory and menace, yet offered no escape. The cabin was patient, and so was whatever watched from the glass. I didn't move. I couldn't. The cabin was quiet, too quiet, even though it seemed to hold its breath. Then the radio hummed. Soft at first, almost shy, a low vibration through the floorboards. I hadn't touched it. It hadn't been on. Yet the hum grew, swelling into murmurs I couldn't understand. Words formed, barely audible, directed at me, though I couldn't be sure. Secrets teased in syllables that made my skin crawl. Static wove through the whispers, rising and falling like a pulse. Lights flickered overhead. Each crackle in the radio matched a shadow, sliding along the walls. I could smell the faint ozone of electricity, tinged with the must of the old cabin. The murmurs became voices, sometimes pleading, sometimes warning, sometimes laughing, soft, hollow, just out of reach. I leaned closer to the radio. My breath hung white in the cold cabin air. Each syllable felt like it touched my mind directly, as though the cabin itself was speaking through the machine. I stepped back. The whispers shifted with me, turning around the room. Following, always following, I reached to switch it off. The static surged, as if resisting, as if alive. Then silence. The light stabilized. The cabin exhaled. But the quiet was heavier now. A presence lingered in every corner, in every shadow, a waiting emptiness, like the radio had only paused, not stopped. I sat frozen. The hum had left, but the whispering remained, curling through my thoughts, just beneath the surface of hearing. The radio sat innocently, silent, yet I could still feel it, like a heartbeat behind the walls, counting down to something I didn't want to know. The mirror caught me in the dim cabin light. At first, it was just my reflection, but something felt off. My movements lagged slightly behind my own. A smile I hadn't given stretched across the glass. A blink too slow, a head turned delayed. I leaned closer. The air thickened, fog sneaking along the floorboards, curling into corners. The reflection twisted subtly, mocking, mimicking, yet not fully me. Shadows moved behind the glass. Slow, deliberate, curling and stretching like smoke. Sometimes matching me, sometimes moving independently. The room felt smaller with every passing second. I touched the mirror. Fingers met cold glass, but the reflection did not meet mine. It watched, and it smiled. The hum of the cabin grew faintly louder, would groan softly beneath my weight. I could smell damp and decay, like the fog carried secrets from some hidden place. The reflection wavered. It stretched, then thinned, like it was leaking into the room or pulling the room into itself. I tried to turn away, but my eyes returned to it, drawn against my will. Then it vanished. Not a blink, not a ripple, just gone. The mirror stared back at an empty room, yet I felt eyes still pressing from the glass. I stepped back, alone, or so I thought. A whisper brushed the edges of my mind, soft, cold, certain. The air remained thick. The fog lingered. And somewhere behind the reflection, something waited. The forest had changed. Fog rolled in fast, thicker than any I had seen. It swallowed a familiar path, curled around tree trunks, roots, rocks. Shapes moved inside the mist. Humanoid but wrong. Too tall, too thin, too fluid. They slipped between the pines, vanishing when I blinked. Voices echoed softly, calling, coaxing, whispering. I could feel them tugging me forward, even as my legs begged me to stay still. The ground felt uncertain beneath my feet. Each step pressed into mud, then solid, then nothing at all. I couldn't tell where the path ended, or if it even existed. Shadows grew long and twisted. Every tree looked subtly different, their bark twisting into shapes I didn't want to name. The air smelled damp, like soil and wet pine, but faintly metallic as well, like old iron. I heard movement around me, soft rustling, then silence. Then again, the fog swallowed sound as easily as light, leaving only presence, cold and patient. I tried to retrace my steps. The trees had shifted. The trail no longer followed my memory. I was surrounded by uncertainty, every sense betraying me. A shape emerged closer, then another, then none. The fog twisted, pulling me deeper, distorting distance, direction, and time. I was alone, yet not alone. The forest breathed, the fog whispered, and shapes watched from the corners of perception. I stopped, held my breath. The fog pressed in, quiet, dense, and inescapable. I realized the forest had claimed me, and the path, if it had ever existed, was gone. The forest was quiet. Too quiet, even for the fog-heavy night. I walked carefully, listening to my own breath and the soft crunch of needles beneath my feet. Then it moved, a shadow detached from a tree. At first playful, mimicking my steps, stretching and folding like it wanted attention. I smiled hesitant, but the feeling didn't stay light. The shadow's laughter followed me, hollow enough to chill the air around me. I reached toward it. It stayed just out of reach. Every step I took, it shifted, slipping effortlessly between light and dark. The fog thickened. It bent around the shadow, stretching the trees, elongating my own form until I barely recognized myself. The laughter grew louder, mocking, teasing, echoing from nowhere. I tried to turn away. It was closer, always closer, yet never touching. Branches scratched at my arms. The smell of wet pine filled my nose, and something faintly metallic lingered in the cold air. I stopped. The shadow paused. Its laughter became soft, but heavy with meaning. I wanted to run, but my legs felt anchored, the forest holding me in its thick fog, the shadow circling like a predator, but smiling. Then it darted behind a tree. For a moment, I thought it gone, but when I blinked, it was closer than I had ever thought possible. I swallowed hard. The laughter faded, but the presence remained, and I realized it had been studying me all along. The fog shifted. I was alone again, or perhaps it had never left at all. I returned to the cabin. The forest behind me was silent, yet the air felt heavier, almost weighting. Inside, everything was wrong. Furniture swapped places. Doors led to corners I didn't remember. Shadows lingered in spaces that had been empty before. The clock ticked backward, each second a small inversion of time. Whispers flitted around the walls, speaking of events yet to come, as if the cabin itself remembered the future. I moved through the rooms cautiously. The floorboards groaned beneath my feet. A chair tilted in a way that defied gravity. A window reflected not the room I saw, but something older, darker. I tried to retrace my steps. Every hallway twisted. Every doorway seemed farther than it should be. Reality shifted subtly, like the world had been rewritten while I wasn't looking. The shadows in corners shifted when I glanced at them. They moved deliberately, slowly, folding into shapes that suggested presence, even when none should exist. I felt the walls breathe, not air but intention. The cabin was aware, watching, measuring. I leaned against the table. It felt solid, then soft, then vanished entirely beneath my hands. A whisper slid across the room. No words, just a vibration in my chest. I wanted to leave, but every exit had changed. I was trapped in the cabin's strange reversal. Time itself felt inverted, past and future overlapping in the shadows. Every step, I took led me deeper into confusion. I stopped, breathed. The cabin was quiet for a moment, but the sense of disorientation remained. I wasn't sure if I had returned, or if I had never left at all. The lake was quiet, fog curling low across the water. The air smelled of damp earth and something faintly sweet, like flowers long dead. I saw her then, a pale figure, standing at the water's edge. A young girl, motionless, silent. Her hair clung to her face, damp from the mist. She beckoned, not with words, not with sound. A gesture, gentle, patient. I stepped closer. The fog shifted, swirling around my legs. Footprints appeared behind her, leading nowhere. Each one filled quickly with mist, as if the earth itself refused to hold them. I reached out, but she vanished. The mist closed over the spot where she had stood, leaving only ripples in the lake. I moved forward cautiously. The fog pressed against me, soft and cold. Every breath hung white in the air. The quiet was almost too loud, filled with the sense of unseen eyes. Her presence lingered. A tug at my chest, curiosity and fear intertwined. I wanted to call her, to reach her, but my voice felt swallowed by the mist. Footsteps echoed behind me, but when I turned, nothing moved. The footprints were gone, erased by the fog, leaving only emptiness and memory. I stayed at the shore. The water mirrored me, then the space where she had been. A gentle pull, insistent yet impossible to grasp. The mist shifted again. A shadow moved within it, not quite human, not quite girl. I felt a mixture of empathy and terror, an understanding I couldn't name. Then silence. The fog thickened. The lake seemed to hold its breath. And I realized she had never truly left. Only waiting, patient, pale, unseen just beyond the mist. The floor beneath me vibrated. A low hum resonated through the cabin. Soft, constant, almost alive. I followed it. Each step on the wooden boards echoed sharply, then faded into the humming. The basement door stood before me. It was dark and heavy, like it held its own weight of secrets. Shadows moved along the walls as I descended, slow, deliberate, pressing against the edges of my vision. I could feel them shifting, stretching, as though the room itself was bending toward the hum. The vibration grew stronger. It thrummed in my chest, matching my heartbeat, pulling me deeper into the darkness. The air smelled damp and earthy, with a metallic edge I couldn't place. The hum began to form whispers, soft syllables, chanting, coaxing, teasing. I couldn't understand the words, but they tugged at the edges of my mind. The basement seemed impossibly deep. I opened the door. Darkness poured out, thick and heavy. The walls pressed in, shadows dancing against surfaces that should have been flat. I stepped closer. The hum wrapped around me, vibrating under my feet, up my arms, filling my chest with low, constant dread. I could see movement against the far walls, faint shapes sliding along, touching nothing, yet leaving impressions like fingerprints in shadow. I wanted to turn away. The staircase felt endless beneath my weight, and the air seemed colder, thicker, pressing into my lungs. But I couldn't leave. The whispers, the hum, it was pulling me, calling me. Something beneath the cabin had always been there. I paused at the bottom. The darkness was deeper than reason. The shadows shifted closer. The hum grew louder, insistent, and the whispering chanting wrapped around me completely. I swallowed hard and realized the basement wasn't just a place. It was alive, and it had been waiting for me. The lake shimmered under pale moonlight. Mist hovered low across the water, soft and cold against my skin. Then I saw it. A humanoid figure drifted above the surface. It moved without effort, gliding smoothly, unbound by ripples or wind. Its eyes caught the moonlight, reflecting pale, unnatural glimmers. Every step, or drift, it took seemed deliberate, calculated, like it knew I was watching. The water bent around it, ripples twisting unnaturally, as if the lake itself obeyed its presence. I could feel a tug in my chest, drawing me closer. Despite every instinct screaming away, I stepped forward. The figure mirrored nothing human. Limbs elongated, movements fluid, impossible. The mist curled around it, and I felt the air thicken, cold and still. It stopped suddenly. I stopped, a pause heavier than silence, filled with intent. I wanted to look away. I couldn't. Every muscle froze. Every sense tuned to the figure above the water. Then it blinked, or vanished. I couldn't tell which. Ripples lingered, bending reality, mocking the order of the world. The lake was still again, but the tension remained, pressed against my chest, etched into the mist. I stepped back. The water seemed to sigh, and I felt the figure's gaze lingering, even though it had gone. The night stretched on, the fog thickened, and the lake waited. I couldn't shake the feeling that it would return. The attic stairs groaned beneath me. Every step echoed through the cabin, soft, deliberate, like a warning. Shadows stretched along the walls, slipping beneath floorboards, moving where they shouldn't. I reached the top. Dust hung thick in the air, coating every surface with quiet decay. The smell of old wood and something metallic pressed against my nose. Rustling came from the far corner. Soft, measured, deliberate. Not wind, not animals. Something else. I moved closer. Every item seemed shifted slightly. Books leaned differently. Chairs angled just so, as if the attic itself had a memory, and it wanted me to notice. The shadows twisted around me, curling along the beams, then slipping between the rafters. I could feel eyes watching from above, but I dared not look. A faint whisper rose, brushing along the edges of my mind. I could almost understand it, but the words melted before meaning could form. I stepped further into the attic. The rustling followed. Shadows thickened in corners, pressing closer without moving. A floorboard shifted beneath my weight, though I knew I had not stepped there before. I froze. The attic held its breath. Every sound I made was mirrored, every movement observed. Then the rustling stopped. Silence fell, dense and heavy, but I could still feel the presence. Watching, waiting, I backed away slowly. The shadows retreated slightly, but the sense of being observed remained, curling around me like smoke. The attic had secrets, and it knew I had seen them. The cabin walls shifted in the dim light. Shadows stretched across surfaces, curling and folding like smoke caught in corners. Then they moved differently. Letters formed, sliding along walls and fog glass. Words appeared, fleeting, cryptic, twisting, sometimes warnings, sometimes taunts. I leaned closer. The shadows writhed, morphing as if aware of my gaze. I tried to read them, but the meanings shifted, slipping just beyond comprehension. The air smelled damp and metallic, thick and heavy in my lungs. Every breath hung, trembling, as the words writhed before my eyes. I spoke softly, almost pleading. The shadows twisted further, letters stretching into shapes I couldn't name, then curling back into whispers that felt alive. The fog glass reflected me, but distorted, as if the shadows had entered the mirror too. I tried to reach out, but my hand met only cold, unyielding air. A shiver crawled down my spine. The whispers slid into my thoughts, teasing, questioning, never answering. Every shape in the corners of the room seemed aware, folding toward me, pressing without touching. I stepped back. The letters dissolved into black smoke. Yet the feeling remained, something intelligent, deliberate, observing, folding reality around me, asking questions I couldn't answer. I breathed slowly. The room was silent again, but the shadows lingered, and I knew the words would return. Waiting, always watching. The forest felt different. Every tree seemed subtly shifted. The path I had walked before was gone, swallowed by mist and memory. I tried to retrace my steps. The trail vanished beneath my feet, erased as if it had never existed. Twigs snapped, leaves rustled, but no one was there. Whispers echoed from impossible directions. Soft, coaxing, insistent. They tugged at me, pulling me deeper into forest, where the fog thickened, dense and clinging. Every familiar landmark felt wrong. A boulder I remembered was smaller. A tree that should have been to my left was now to my right. I stopped. My breath hung white in the air. The silence pressing around me, heavy and unnatural. Even the wind seemed hesitant. Shadows shifted at the edges of my vision. I blinked. They were gone. Or maybe they had never been there at all. I moved forward cautiously. Every step felt both endless and trapped, like the forest was folding on itself. The fog curled around me, shaping and reshaping, distorting distance, direction, and time. I called out softly. No answer, only the whispers, soft and echoing, pulling me into uncertainty. I tried to find the path again. Each familiar tree became unfamiliar. Each trail disappeared beneath my feet. The forest had become a loop, a place without exit, and I realized the fog, the trees, the whispers, they had claimed me. I was alone, trapped, and the vanishing path led nowhere but forward. The forest was thick with fog. Each breath hung white, curling in the cold air. Every step felt heavier than the last, as if the ground itself resisted my movement. Then I saw them, pairs of eyes, glowing faintly among the trees. They blinked only when I looked away, vanishing if I stared too long. A rustle whispered nearby. I froze. The eyes remained silent and patient, tracking me from every direction at once. The fog thickened, shifting around the trees, curling like smoke around the glowing points. Every sound distorted, footsteps echoing unnaturally loud, then fading into silence. I tried to move. No relief. Every turn brought me closer to the eyes. Always ahead, always watching. The air smelled damp, earthy, with metallic tang beneath it. My breath puffed in small clouds, each one trembling. Shadows stretched and twisted between the trunks. The eyes reflected faint light in shapes that weren't entirely natural. I felt their presence like a weight pressing against my chest, their gaze folding the forest around me. I whispered softly, but no answer came. Only the blinking, silent pairs of eyes, holding attention, waiting, patient. I wanted to run. My legs refused. The forest had become a trap with eyes everywhere and nowhere, and the fog thickened, swallowing the trail behind me. I stood still, heart hammering. The eyes did not blink. They simply waited, watching, and I realized there was no escape. I walked along the cabin wall. Something shifted. A door appeared where none had been before. Though it looked old, familiar, yet impossibly new. A faint draft seeped through its edges, cold and insistent. I reached for the handle. The metal was icy, sending a shiver up my arm. I hesitated, but curiosity tugged me forward. I opened it. The hallway stretched beyond, mirroring the cabin I had left. Yet everything was distorted, folding in ways my mind couldn't track. Shadows stretched along the walls, elongating, bending, pressing against the edges of perception. The air smelled of damp wood, tinged with something faintly metallic, like forgotten iron. A whisper drifted from the far end, soft, coaxing, patient. It urged me to move deeper. I stepped forward. The floor groaned beneath me. The walls seemed to breathe with each motion. I tried to look back. The door had vanished. I was trapped in the hallway's impossible folds, folding into shadows that moved of their own accord. A faint light shimmered ahead, pale and unsteady, but it offered no guidance, only a sense of presence, watching, waiting, patient and deliberate. I took another step. The shadows bent closer, curling around the edges of the hall. The whispering grew louder, pressing against my mind. I realized then, the door had not led anywhere familiar. It had opened into something beyond comprehension, yet it had been waiting for me all along. The air in the cabin grew colder. My breath hung white, curling in front of my face. Every exhale formed mist, thick and slow, drifting through the room. Shadows condensed in the corners, curling like smoke, coiling and twisting with a life of their own. A low hum filled the air, vibrating through the floor, through the walls, settling into my chest. Something brushed past me, soft, deliberate, cold enough to leave goosebumps in its wake. I couldn't see it, yet I felt its presence cling to my skin. The cabin seemed to shrink. Every wall pressed closer, every shadow stretching longer than it should. The fog from my breath lingered, thickening, curling, as if the room itself was breathing with me. The hum deepened, forming whispers that tickled the edges of my mind. They teased, they warned, but offered no clarity. I tried to move. My legs felt stiff, unresponsive, like the cold had anchored them to the floor. The shadows twisted around me, folding into shapes that defied reason. I held my breath. The mist stung my lungs. The air seemed to freeze around me, every exhale becoming a visible trap. Then it passed, a soft brush of something unseen, leaving my skin tingling, my chest tight with dread. I was alone, yet not alone. The frozen breath lingered, the shadows lingered, and the hum continued. Patient, deliberate, eternal. The ground by the lake was soft. Footprints appeared in the mud, leading toward the water, then returning again, though no one was there. Each step echoed unnaturally loud, stamping into the silence. I followed them cautiously, the air damp, cold, and thick with fog. The water lapped softly against the shore, ripples bending strangely where the prints ended. The smell of wet earth mixed with something faintly metallic. I stepped closer. The footprints were identical to my own, yet impossible they hadn't existed before. And every movement I made, the prints multiplied, as if someone or something was walking beside me, just out of sight. The fog shifted, curling around my legs, whispering faintly, soft syllables brushing the edge of thought. I could feel eyes on me, watching every step I took. I tried to ignore them, turn away, but the prints followed, each step forward, backward, looping endlessly in the mud. The shadows by the lake stretched unnaturally, leaning toward me from the water's edge. I felt my chest tighten, the cold creeping deeper. I stopped. Every instinct screamed to run, but the footprints persisted, returning no matter where I went. I realized then I was not pursuing them. They were pursuing me. The lake remained still, fog curling across the surface, and the footprints waited, patient, silent, relentless. The forest shifted around me. Branches creaked softly, bending as though alive, casting shadows that twisted with purpose. The wind carried voices, soft, urgent, curling through the leaves, whispering my name. They urged me deeper into the forest, pulling me forward despite the chill. Roots curled at my feet, slippery and dark, snaking along the trail as if guiding me. The air smelled of wet earth, moss, and decay, tinged with something metallic, sharp. Shadows coiled between the trees, pressing against trunks, slipping silently with the fog. I felt them watching, patient, deliberate, folding the forest around me. Every step forward felt heavier. The voices became whispers within my mind, echoing, urging, insistent. I couldn't tell if they were warnings or traps laid in patience. I paused. The trees seemed to bend closer, their branches forming shapes that resembled letters, then twisting into nothing. The fog thickened. Distance became meaningless. Every turn felt like the forest folding in on itself. The whispers never stopped, and I realized I was no longer walking to the woods. I was walking through awareness, and the forest knew it. I moved forward, alone, fog curling at my ankles, shadows watching from roots and trunks, and the trees whispered endlessly, patient, alive, unyielding. I realized the cabin had changed. Not the walls, not the floors, something deeper. Doors responded to my presence. They creaked open as I approached, then closed softly when I moved away. Windows reflected not just my image, but shapes shifting behind me, just out of reach. Lights flickered, soft and deliberate, illuminating corners that had been empty moments before. Shadows lingered. They didn't move randomly. They waited, folding into corners with purpose, as if observing, judging, counting. The floor pulsed beneath me, a low vibration, steady and insistent. It hummed through my chest, through my feet, like the heartbeat of the house itself. I tried to leave. The doors resisted. Hallways stretched longer than memory should allow. The cabin rearranged itself around me, subtle, deliberate, aware. I could feel it in the air, heavy with intention, watching, patient. Every creak of wood, every flicker of light, every shadow pressed closer, reminding me I was not alone, not just in the cabin, but inside its awareness. I stopped, held my breath. The silence was thick, folded with observation, and the cabin watched, patient, alive, and infinite. The lake was still, fog curling across its surface like smoke. I leaned closer to the water, curious, drawn, hesitant. My reflection stared back, but it moved differently than I did. A tilt of the head delayed. A smile that wasn't mine stretched across the glassy surface. The water rippled unnaturally, bending light and shadow, distorting the world around it. I could feel my chest tighten, heart hammering against the cold. It beckoned, a slow, deliberate gesture, drawing me closer. I wanted to turn away. I couldn't. The fog thickened at the edges of the lake, wrapping around my legs. Curling like fingers tried to pull me in. The reflection smiled wider, eyes bright, pale, unyielding. Every instinct screamed to flee, but fascination held me. The air smelled of wet earth, the faint metallic tang lingering in my nose. I knelt at the water's edge. The ripples licked my hands, reflecting not the forest behind me, but the reflection itself, alive, patient, insistent. I stepped back. The reflection remained, smiling, waiting, as if it knew what I feared and relished it. The lake was silent again, yet the feeling of being watched lingered. The reflection had not left. It had only paused, patient, deliberate, and unyielding. The porch was still. Mist curled along the boards, soft and damp against my skin. The rocking chair moved, slowly, back and forth, its rhythm precise, deliberate. No one sat in it. No one had touched it. Yet the creak echoed unnaturally, through the fog, through the air, through me. Shadows gathered nearby, leaning close to corners, pressing against the edges of perception. I could feel them watching, patient, silent, like the chair had summoned them. The air smelled of wet wood and decay. My breath hung white, clouding slowly before me. Each inhale sharp, each exhale heavy with dread. I stepped forward. The rocking slowed, then stopped when I was near, as though waiting for me to leave, or waiting for me to stay. The porch felt smaller. Every plank beneath my feet seemed to shift subtly, curling in shadow. I wanted to sit to break the rhythm, but my body refused. The chair held power I couldn't name. The mist thickened. Shadows moved closer. The rocking resumed softly, its sound hypnotic, measured, eternal. I stepped back, alone, yet surrounded by presence. And I realized the chair had been waiting. For me, for the fog, for the silence. The cabin breathed around me. Footsteps echoed softly on the wooden floors, but no one moved. Voices drifted through the rooms, laughing, whispering, crying, yet no source could be found. Shadows flickered along the walls, independent of light or logic, reenacting moments I had not lived, or perhaps moments I had forgotten. I walked through the hallways. Each step pressed into memory, folding the past into the present into something I could not name. Objects shifted subtly. Books leaned differently. Chairs tilted at impossible angles. The air smelled of dust, old wood, and faint smoke, like memories trapped in the grain of the floors. I paused in the living room. A laugh echoed, soft, distant, almost joyful. Then footsteps ran across the floor above, though I knew the attic was empty. The shadows twisted and lengthened, folding corners into themselves, pressing closer without touching. I felt the cabin watching. Each creak, each whisper, each subtle motion was deliberate, intentional. It replayed echoes of life, folding nostalgia into unease. I stepped back. The voices faded, but the feeling remained. Time blurred, past and present intertwining, and I realized I could not tell if I was observing the cabin or if the cabin was observing me. The cabin and forest merged around me. Shadows moved freely, curling along walls, slipping between tree trunks, following without sound. I walked through the rooms, through the fog-laden trails outside. Every step echoed against emptiness, yet I never felt truly alone. The pale lights lingered, bobbed between the trees, silent, patient, eternal. The fog clung to my skin, cold, damp, unwilling to let go. Whispers slid across my mind, soft, endless, indecipherable, wrapping reality in layers I could not peel back. The cabin hung beneath my feet, alive, deliberate, observing. I realized then no one else existed. No presence, no voice, beyond the shadows that moved around me. They had always been here. They would always remain. The lake reflected nothing but fog. My own reflection twisted in the water, pale, distant, a memory of self. I stepped forward. The forest and cabin stretched endlessly. Each path folded into another. Every shadow held attention. I exhaled. The mist clung. The pale lights blinked. The whispers brushed my thoughts. Alone, but not lonely. The shadows, the fog, the lights, they were constant, patient, eternal. I stopped and accepted it. The world had become this, a quiet realm of watching, breathing, waiting, and I had become part of it.